and we'll insert a catchy theme here.
Yeah, I guess we're going to start with an intro.
We're going to start with something nice and jingly.
Yeah, like a theme song and a TV intro. And,
yeah. Everyone's going to turn to the camera.
Yeah.
Smile. There's going to be a little shine on teeth.
Exactly. Jazz hands and everything.
Jazz hands.
Yeah.
And then they'll all just be, like, brutally murdered.
As is inevitable, really.
Yeah.
Put in charge. Well, apart from that, I think, what's the kind of point of this conversation? Where should we start?
We should start, as we discussed, with a little conversation about the campaign as it's gone so far.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do we begin?
Well, we begin in the world of, in our homebrew campaign.
That's right.
The world is kind of... The world name that I've settled on is kind of, I think, called Dunia Lama, which just translates to the New World in Indonesian, I believe.
The true settlers of the ancient world in this setting.
In my own canon,
Yeah.
this is just Indonesia.
Right. Which is why we are currently playing in fantasy Spain.
Everything reverts to the mean.
That's right, yeah. It's like castization. Everything in nature turns to crab, everything in fantasy turns to Spanish. Yeah.
That is surprisingly accurate. And I guess this campaign is starting off in the continent that we've known, but you listeners may not, as Restria. Restria is kind of a central continent, at least central in terms of it's the centre of the map that I've drawn.
Yeah, relative centre of the world.
Yeah, and it was, at least in older times, the centre of a great, highly advanced empire, an empire that kind of had such great technological means.
And we've had very few actual glimpses into that empire, because we've had the elves.
Yeah.
So we've met very few elves who were surviving at that time.
Yeah.
We had one guy who was in the one shot I ran in your world, who was a skeleton at the bottom of a tower.
Yes.
Who was a king. I need to pull up the notes, but I think we had a moment where he described the sort of collapse, but he didn't know the reason behind it. It just sort of all happened to him. He was merely a witness.
Yeah. And then I think from my end, I kind of teased with you guys through visions, especially in campaign 1, there was a lot of visions being going around, especially as you got closer to the kind of area known as the Scar. I mean, if we have any video, I'll pull up a map and there'll be highlighted areas to show you clearly where the Scar is.
Yeah.
Just know that the Scar is effectively a valley in a great mountain range.
Would it be apt to call it a chasmous valley?
Yes, yeah. I think the best way of thinking of it is like a crater.
Yeah.
Like in, say, an anime, when they fire a massive laser out of a robot gun. Yeah. There's this kind of straight crater through the mountains.
It's like a huge telefrag.
Yeah, exactly. And dead centre of that is the kind of Scar. And the Scar is the remains of a capital city. The capital city of this advanced... kind of arcane and technologically advanced empire. Yeah.
And we sort of, we've had very few brief glances of that, and we have, there have been a few mentions of the remnants of that time.
Yeah.
But the only true big player that has survived it is the sort of patron of the Scar's denizens.
Yeah, so he's been given the moniker of the Dark One.
Yeah. Because the people of Restria are quite uncreative.
Yeah. I think the way that I look at it is, if you've not got any goods, like any gods in your world, or many gods, a kind of primitive name that translates through all cultures and nations is you've got the good one and the dark one, or the light one and the dark one.
Dark one. He lives in the shadow. Oh, he's a criminal? No, he's worse.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
he's like underworld. No.
So he just hasn't paid his lighting.
Like he's a corrupt politician. You're not understanding me at all. I don't know how much simpler I have to make this.
Yeah, it's just kind of like that kind of name. I mean, he has like other smaller like names, the father of lies, and some other terms. I have to kind of go through my notes to give you like better.
Different cultures give him different names.
Yeah, and he was kind of the driving force in campaign 1. Just as a DM, narratively wise, I was inspired by Robert Jordan's writing in The Wheel of Time, and I really liked the kind of the opening to that series. Him himself, like kind of, you got similar vibes to Lord of the Rings.
It reminded me of some of the descriptions of conscription for young men, going to war, especially for the First and Second World War.
Yeah,
of young men sort of suddenly being uprooted. There was an enemy at the gates, and they were pushed out into a world that they knew nothing about. Dangers surrounding them on all sides. Completely unprepared.
Yeah.
And that was very much the start of our campaign, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the survival rate was probably slightly worse.
For our village,
for our group.
Yeah. So most of the players began as members of this one village.
Yeah, they all started as like I think we had one dad, and then most of them were kind of late teens, early 20s, and we had one guy that lived in his parents' basement.
Yes, that's right. And we always assumed was one of the kids, but actually he was only a few years younger than the dad.
Yeah, and he was horrifically ugly both outside and inside. And
a true reprehensible human being.
And the player character very much enjoyed relishing the fact that he had made a monster.
Oh god! So this character was called.
It was called Holger Saxon.
Yeah.
I think the memorable moments.
Holger survived nearly to the end of the campaign.
Yes. Yeah.
Somehow.
He really kind of etched his name into the annals of history.
Yeah.
Simply by, I think, living by the adage of "go fast, die young."
Yeah.
As he would mostly just run into combat, ask questions later.
Yeah.
I do remember that his first combat was quite funny. He originally had rolled up an artificer.
Oh yes, he had a lucky magic rock.
Yeah, he bought a lucky magic rock from a crystal mummy at a kind of town fair. The rock, of course, wasn't magical.
Yeah, but he is.
He is. He just thought it was magical. But he didn't know what to do with the rock. So his approach to combat was to climb a tree and throw the rock.
Get the high ground, get some distance, and use projectiles. Of course, once he used it...
Yeah.
he had to go down, go grab his rock, and then go climb the tree again.
And the best part of it was just his magical focus that he was throwing around.
Yeah. He was left in completely defenseless. And
yeah.
It was useless for the majority of the starting fights.
Yeah.
We had... So, my character was the dad.
Yes.
J. Jonah Jameson.
Yes.
Who was... I was originally going to do the proper, photos of Spider-Man voice, but I found very quickly that I wouldn't be able to hold my throat up long enough.
That, and I think you became exhausted.
I did.
In dealing with
immediately
real life.
Gained real life years having to look after these children who were being played by adults that weren't too much younger than me.
Yeah.
And it was maybe the third session. We had left the village, running from these monsters that had attacked.
Yeah.
And, we were accompanied by the witch, the Penyahir.
Yeah. Penyahir being the kind of term for
sorcerer
or court mage.
Yeah.
in the world.
Majority of them women, because they
Yes.
were sort of like a sisterhood.
But not exclusively.
Not exclusively. It's just that men were rarer because they suffered from, much like in the Wheel of Time,
Yeah.
the men suffered from a sort of magic-based infliction.
Exactly, yeah. That less so, like, this is kind of me divulging as a DM.
Yeah.
Less so originating from like a kind of, in the Wheel of Time they have the idea of like a dragon that isn't really that. There are heroes of legend that kind of repeat themselves. One which is very important to campaign 1, but we'll talk about that later. But in this case, it comes more so from the fact that the person who took that initial cause of the calamity just so happened to be touching the male half of magic at the time, and so by doing so, kind of let something in and messed with the kind of arcane math of the way that it works.
Yeah, I mean, we've never gotten a full sort of insight into the metaphysical laws of magic and souls and gods and all this. The closest we got, I think, was Krem. But Krem, who was a character at the start, he came from the village.
Yeah.
And he was a male touched by the source. And his affliction was quite a slow burn.
Yeah.
But because he never shared his experiences with the rest of the party, he was very sort of reclusive. He did suffer in silence, and he eventually paid the price. He did get taken by the Dark One.
Yep.
And he was consumed by the magic power.
Yeah.
For an incredibly dumb series of reasons.
And I think, honestly, looking back at that first campaign, it was a campaign defined almost by two players' decisions.
Yeah.
And it was two individual decisions that I can put on. One was Krem's decision, basically just to kind of accept whatever power he could from this entity that had been
stalking him.
Yeah, stalking him, and just kind of in his brain for months.
Been clawing at the inside of his skull. I'll let you in. Great.
And then Thexan, in his final decision to kind of like try and get Krem out of that creature's clutches by giving himself up.
I guess we should go through the different characters and how they sort of so the starting roster was so we had Thexan, who I think you'll agree with me was unofficially the main character.
Yeah, I think had Cram not made the decision that he had, it would have been like a tandem duo with the almost the Frodo and Sam vibe.
Of course, but he had to share that seat closely because we had the upcoming new characters that came in that really contested that. But we had Thexan, who was the son of Joe Jenner Jameson, which is my character, who was the adult. He was a fighter.
He was a fighter, and
he was like a proper frontliner, protect the kids, responsible adult.
But he started as a fighter and then became a blood hunter later on.
That's right. Yeah. So this is Thexan, not Jonah. Jonah was a fighter the whole way through. He was suspicious of magic because his wife was a magician. Penny here. There was a lot of vague sort of implicities about the birth of Thexan and his brother who didn't survive childbirth. But there was a lot.
There was a bear incident.
There was a bear incident, and there was a lot of trauma around there.
Yeah.
And the result was that Jonah didn't like magic. He didn't trust it. He didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that meant that when Thexan started developing magic, Jonah was really trying to keep him as far away from possible. But of course, that didn't work out.
No.
Thexan was a blood hunter through and through.
Yeah.
He gained more and more sort of mystical power as the journey went on. And of course, Jonah wasn't there eventually. He was not there to stop it.
Yeah, so I guess moving from I think we should start with maybe Jonah's story because you played Jonah.
Yeah.
Jonah had a moment where.
I think we have to explain the other characters before we go into why Jonah left the party.
Yeah, I think precisely we need to describe Thexan.
Yeah.
So Thexan was Jonah's son, and
he was
petulant.
How do we describe Thexan? extremely single-minded.
Yes, yeah. He was a man on the mission.
Yeah.
Sometimes he didn't know what the mission was.
Yeah.
But his mission was that there was a mission and he was going to get that mission done.
Thexan was like the dream for any aspiring cult trying to recruit really naive and very driven young people.
Yeah, he had the gusto,
but not the intellect to direct him.
And I guess from there, like he, at least at the start of the campaign, played this character or this role that was kind of pushing back a bit against Jonah.
He was fighting the authority, and then when the authority left, he eventually sort of became it.
Yeah.
He sort of took on that fatherly role and became the same exhausted, tired, petulant man who got annoyed with the childish antics of his party.
Yeah. And I think it was partly the reason why Jonah left for that period of time was because he like you said, you as a player
there was a moment that we will discuss once we've discussed some of the other characters. So your brother played.
My brother Felix played. Originally played the trouble character of all trouble characters.
Oh, God,
he played.
Did not last long.
He played a guy called Jasper.
Jasper, who became an instant sort of meme and recurring joke in our campaign because he was reprehensible, even worse than Holger.
He was. I think, as most of my brother's characters have been, very entertaining.
Yes.
And very, very fun to play with. The issue was, Jasper made it known very early on that his entire aim was just to cause tomfoolery, to kind of cause a reaction from the rest of the party. And I think that kind of reached its focal point in session 1.
Yes. We had a moment where, because of course, they were on the run, they had gone to a different town, and magic, not liked by the local militias. People don't like magic because they associate it with the Dark One, because the Dark One is the only one that really openly uses magic.
Yeah.
And because most male magicians go crazy and end up killing themselves and a lot of other people when they use it. And so we were going through this town, and of course there was a priest with the theocracy of Portalov, the sort of big, I think the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, traditional witch hunters. Yeah. And Jasper had gone to these people and had accused Jonah of witchcraft, of being a paedophile, and asked for a rescue, and had attempted to sell him to a bounty hunter. All within the span of about an hour, he had attempted to essentially sell off the adult in the group in order to get funds for the party's travel, and just to be rid of the voice of reason and authority.
Bear in mind, this is after at the start of the session, where he had tried to convince the party he had a plan to take over and prank the whole town. But he had no plan. And he wasted, I think...
That's right! He just left someone in his house waiting for him for 3 hours or something, while he went away and just forgot.
And it was this situation where 3 hours of in-game time. But in real life time, we had sat with him for 30 minutes, and he was proceeding to and ah his way through a plot that sounded very much like, so we do this, and then I become king.
So Jonah discovered these and got quite mad. He didn't attack Jasper. He just realised that was the point at which Jasper could no longer be left alone, because he would do something disastrous. Their only line of defence then against the wider world was discretion, and Jasper was the opposite of discreet.
Yeah, and I think that kind of pushed me a little bit as a DM, and because he's my brother, I can approach him and be like, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?"
You're heading for an early character grave.
And we kind of had a discussion, and he kind of agreed that he'd rather switch to something else. And by that I told him, please, change character.
Which ultimately was a really good decision.
Yeah, I mean, he came back with... Don't get me wrong, Jasper was a banger,
Yeah.
but for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. But instead, we got to meet one of the few other races accessible to us at that time, which were the Ogier.
Yeah, again, inspired by the Wheel of Time. I really was kind of into that world, and I still really do. Kind of love the elements of it. I thought that it'd be a great option to kind of, reflavour the Furbolg and give them a new lease of life in the world. And so he kind of rejoined as an Ogier by the name of Gronk.
Gronk. A sort of throwback to some of his previous characters, such as Grobert.
Yep, yeah, he's a big fan of green things that start with GRO.
Yes. G-related monster names.
Yeah. And I guess background for Grobert, just know that he is a bit of an urban legend in the group. I'm sure we'll cover his story something
I'm
else.
certain there was a moment in your world where Grobert was mentioned as like an ancient knight.
Yeah.
But only in passing reference.
Yeah, I don't know if that was more like me just as a DM getting carried away and being
I think it may have been a slip of the tongue, a Freudian slip.
Yeah, but Gronk was amazing. He was a kind of lovable, gentle giant.
He was up for some mischief. I mean, he and Jonah immediately hit it off because they were like the only ones allowed to go in to buy the expensive spices and drinks for the group. He was a bad influence on Jonah.
Yeah.
And but they had some fun. I think that Gronk liked Jonah a lot, but Gronk also liked Holger a lot because Holger was the other close to adult who was just as chaotic.
Yeah, and I think the Gronk at the start of the campaign, because of course he evolved over the campaign. Not much, but a little bit.
Do you remember what class did he begin as?
He began as a paladin. He was always a paladin.
He was always a paladin.
Yeah.
Which did mean that he was a great help when it came to combat. Because rather than lasting 5 rounds, it lasted 2 rounds after a few smites.
So he was very lucky on his rolls for stats.
Yeah.
And he kind of rolled out this beast of a character.
As always.
Yeah, as always. And he makes quite good combat characters, and nothing like ridiculous, but like just really good at one thing. And Gronk's whole thing was that he would hit you in the face really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And
he was a walking warhead.
Yeah.
And I think that because he was a decent frontliner, I felt secure enough leaving my character to go away. And so as they were entering the Scar, they were going to journey up to the Penya here, and they were going to look for signs of the Dark One, and they were sort of going to find and train with the Penya here to get the people in the party who were magical, to get them some sense of control over their burdening powers so they didn't flip out and go crazy like most people do.
Yeah.
And Jonah doesn't like magic, he doesn't like the Penya here, so he had a good reason not to go.
Yes.
But he didn't want to abandon the party.
Yeah.
And I think that if they had treated him with more respect, he would have gone with them.
Yeah.
But he had a task to do.
Yeah.
Jonah had a mysterious backstory that we never got into, that we would have elaborated on. I never fully elaborated it to you, because I didn't want to set anything in stone, just in case we had to come up with something on the fly.
Yeah.
And something I made to replace Jonah was that he had a cousin. So by family connections, one of Thexen's ancestors was a Penya here, okay?
Yeah.
And along that same family line was this cousin, Blum.
Yeah.
Blum, rat catcher. Why was he called that? Well, it was his job. He was a rat catcher. Not an amazing one. He was quasi-homeless when they met him. Jonah gave him some instructions, and then he had to run off to do some mysterious task.
Yeah.
And they left. He left the party in the hands of Blum to guide them through the mountain pass up to the... Was it called the Greenhold?
It was the Green Mountain Vale, which was kind of the centre of power for the Penyahir. The Penyahir, like kind of in the world, they decided to place this there as it was kind of like geographically right on the gates of the Scar and of the kind of the main focal point of the Dark One's power. Where do you position your best weapon against him? Right on the front lines. Admittedly, those front lines were more kind of, Cold War-ish at this point. But that was the kind of reasoning for the positioning. I think maybe we should start as well with just getting I think there's a couple other characters from the start.
Yeah.
But by a couple, I mean one. We had another character, Lorena, who was a sorcerer, and she kind of filled the role of...
Was she healing? I think she was healer adjacent.
I think at the start, the beginning.
Before she turned into a nuker.
Yeah, she began this role of like this path of, the evolving young woman's journey of trying to understand more about the powers. Her mother at the start revealed herself to be kind of a Penyahir sleeper agent, who was there to who was there to kind of look after people, but that kind of was never really explored, largely because it was related a bit to Cram, and Cram kind of disappeared before the dots could be linked.
But Lorena always seemed to have her own subplot going on.
Yeah, it was a situation where the rest of the party were all very much kind of on that track, listening to each other's stories and getting involved, offer each other helping hand. And when Lorena hit the town, she did her own thing.
Yeah. She said, I want to go do this. I'm going to wait until everyone else is asleep. Or I'm going to wait until everyone goes over there. Yeah. I say, oh, Lorena, are you with us? No, I'm going to this other place.
Yeah, and a lot of the time she would do things that would like really benefit the party. She'd get you a key piece of information that you'd need.
Of course.
But it was this kind of funny moment of her having her own plot going on and being still a member of this party with people who are kind of like constantly like trying to sort each other out, trying to help each other out. And then kind of I guess moving back to that to help explain a little bit more about why kind of Blum comes into the fold, and before we can kind of talk about Blum's character, the party are attacked in their starting village of Greenhold by these monstrous things.
Yeah. They weren't orcs, because we encounter orcs later on.
Yes.
They were unique to the Dark One's forces.
Yeah, they were like hybrid orc monster things, like orc minotaurs.
Yeah, I got the impression that it was sort of amalgamated creatures that were sort of like mutants might be the wrong word, but certainly adjacent to them.
Yeah, it was like this kind of chimera, this dark chimera.
Right.
And they attacked, and they were led by kind of another element of the Wheel of Time, the kind of the merge or the fades. Just because I think that it's a really cool image.
Yeah, I mean, the always really an epic sort of commander of evil forces. I mean, you've got the Ring Wraiths, you've got the Dementors, you've got the Fades, even like calling back images of like the Grim Reaper, a gaunt figure shrouded in a black cloak would never be not spooky.
Exactly, and I think we wanted to kind of use that for the first part. The party then leaves Greenhold. They head to another small town until they arrive at a larger town called Karod. And Karod is kind of like a military hub for the nation that they're in, which is the Restoring Kingdom. The wider kind of geopolitics of the continent is that in a previous age, it was defined by the Restoring Empire, which saw the Restoring Kingdom kind of expand its borders almost to the entirety of the continent, and it is subsequently diminished in power. And as it's diminished in power, old enemies are starting to see a weakened foe, and are looking to kind of take a bite. And so I guess before the party decide to kind of flee this Dark One and these things, they see tensions begin to rise in the city of Karod as an invasion has been kind of begun.
Yes, we see an army of knights muster and ride off to battle. Partly sort of inspired towards it by some of the information given by a party about this army that attacked Greenhold.
Yeah. And in this kind of, as this party and this host move off, rather unfortunately for the Restoring Kingdom, it's attacked by two other kingdoms, by two other nations kind of sandwiching it.
Really converging.
Yeah, and I guess this is kind of an opportunity a little bit to peer behind the end screen and just talk about a little bit of how I try and run geopolitics in the world when it comes to conflicts. I'll try and kind of assign general scores and then just roll using D6s, a series of rolls to dictate the successfulness of certain armies against other armies.
I see.
And I remember, I think I show this, I talked a lot about this because it is more mathy in nature to Seb, who played Thexan at the time. And I wrote this kind of, I sat down for I think close to 2 hours and I was rolling a D6 constantly. And I walked away with about 40 A4 pages of simulated battles. And I had, and by battles I mean skirmishes. I had I think near close to like the man statistics on just how many people had died.
Good grief.
I think I have streamlined that process quite a bit now, but it did help with kind of creating key NPCs like commanders and how they reacted and how that all happened. But it was in this kind of this background, this war, that the party then decided to kind of flee the kingdom as it was seemingly being beset on by three mysterious enemies, and head to the Peñahir and try and get some answers.
And we never thought for a second that things would really change when we got back home.
Yeah.
We thought, okay, most things, there'll be news of war, but there won't be any big changes. And boy, were we wrong.
Yeah, I think it was this situation where a domino effect happened just via the statistics, which resulted, in narratively speaking, in a massive battle. Several of the commanders were wiped out, and effectively the Restoring monarchy was dissolved, destroyed.
Driven into exile, and we did meet a few of those individuals. And Restria was not a place on the map. It was completely absorbed by the neighbouring countries.
Yeah.
But that came much later.
Yeah.
When they reached the mountain pass, just as we were leaving, that last time we really touched true Restrian soil, as it were.
Yeah.
They met Blum Ratcatcher, who was a man down on his luck.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the first times that I got into the habit of playing characters who are quite nice people, and they aren't very strong.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite young, but they look and act older than they are.
Yeah, I think just kind of looking forward to campaign 2, just a hunch that trend maybe continues a little bit.
Yes, it does. We'll get to Herschel another time. Lots of things to talk about there.
Yeah.
But Blum, he was a rat catcher, so he was, an exterminator. Mm-hmm. Mostly dealt with bugs, small animals. Sometimes when he was down on money, he went out and he hunted in the forest, small game.
Yeah.
But he was, people respected Blum because he provided a service that was quite necessary.
Yeah.
It wasn't very glamorous, but it was needed.
Yeah.
When the party came to him, he had made the journey into the mountains once.
Yes.
And he was not the most reliable guide. But it was interesting for Thexan to discover that he had more family.
Yeah, I don't think Thexan, until that point, kind of realised that there was anything outside of Greenhold. I guess this was kind of like when Blom almost immediately slotted into the party because of that connection.
Yeah.
Thexan kind of saw it as like, well, this is my cousin. He assumed older, although...
He assumed older, but technically not.
Yeah.
I think Blum was actually younger than him. No, he wasn't, because Thexan would have been early. He would have been teen, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Blum was early 20s.
Yes. The difference must have been like 4 years.
Yeah, pretty close.
But I remember that at that point when kind of the party joined together, that was the kind of almost the setting point where the party kind of crystallised for a bit.
Yeah.
Those were the kind of main characters for the bulk of the campaign.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of initial travel into the Green Mountain Vale was a little bit of a kind of starting point for the party. You guys had that initial travel, and during that it inevitably went wrong. I think you had an encounter with a Yeti,
That's right.
where Gronk smote the Yeti with a thunderous smite in the middle of a valley with snow and caused an avalanche.
I mean, as a DM, that must have been a chef's kiss. Thank you, Gronk, for that godsend of a narrative pusher.
I was like, you know what? I'll take it, and let's roll with it. And this is when I think the biggest kind of glimpse behind or glimpse into the plot first was revealed, and it was effectively this avalanche caused the party to rush into a cave system to avoid it. And as they rush into the cave system used by this Yeti, you uncover a small crack in the stone wall that leads to a crystalline kind of hollow, which, as you entered and looked around, appeared to have sealed within it loads of floating elves.
Absolutely. Yeah, frozen, perfectly preserved through the ravages of time.
Yeah.
Of course, at that moment in time, we didn't really know much about elves, because no one did. Elves weren't a presence.
Yeah.
They were an extinct race. They weren't an option for us when we made characters.
Yeah.
Well, at least not at that point. And so this was the first time we were really getting a good connection, and I believe this was the moment when we had a few characters that had visions to their past lives.
Yeah. So
And that was Thexan.
Holger.
Yeah, Holger.
Krem did as well.
Krem also got visions from his dark spirit, his tempter.
Yeah.
In these moments. And I believe... Did Lorena also?
Lorena also got one.
Yeah. But then we had... Jonah wasn't there.
Yeah.
And he would have if he
yeah.
had, yeah.
I had kind of written Jonah's little glimpse as well.
Yeah.
He was a commander in charge of kind of a group of archers, which would have been a little bit at odds of what he normally was, but each of them was kind of meant to reflect a certain attribute that each player had, just implicitly, as the type of person they were.
Yeah.
It kind of gave a glimpse into the kind of conclusive last battle at the end of the second age that led to the third age.
Current setting.
Yeah.
It was... So those first few glimpses, they connected to their past lives. Yeah. But I believe there was a meme that one of us made at that moment where it was, we all had connection to these dark lives and we all collectively ignored them.
Yeah, it was a real, okay, that was a cool moment.
No.
Bye.
Let's look at this other shiny thing.
Yeah.
Because I think immediately after we had them, there was a cool jewel in the wall that we cut out, and there were some artifacts.
Yes. I think Kjolder found the first of his Holger's twin elven blades.
Yeah.
One of which was attached to a roaming golem that was roaming around the ring of this kind of art, this mountain range, and he could feel via a connection, almost like a radar GPS ping, roughly where it was to this other twin blade. And if he kind of brought the two together, they would amplify each other's magical abilities. And those were kind of his like artifacts that he would carry through the campaign. Other than his other artifact that he gets later on, he immediately was like, "Oh, yeah, this is a cool backstory drop.
It was.
Let's go get my item."
What he was really after was the cool shinies. As always.
And I actually think that it was from that moment of hearing about it, the party immediately decided that getting to the Peña was now the second priority. And getting these blades was number one.
Yes, they were incredibly power hungry, this party. But as all D&D parties are, let's be honest.
Yeah.
We did make our way to the mountains. There were small sort of other inconvenient things in the way. And then we made it to the actual Peña hold.
Yeah.
And at that time, Blum was still... He shared Jonah's suspicion of magic because, you know, he was part of that family. He had been told the old tales.
Yeah, exactly. Like Mama Jameson brought them all around the fire and said, "Remember, kids, don't trust a mage because they do magic and that's bad."
Yeah. So he didn't go see the actual Peña here with this group. He focused on making money. That was all he did because we had, I mean, was it 2 years?
Yeah, it was a 2-year time skip, basically, where the party had the opportunity to do things to just advance their characters, give them a couple of years on them, let them mature a little bit. Yeah, it allowed players to do some things with their roleplay that made them act a bit more as adults.
Yeah.
During this time, Thexan clearly became paranoid.
He became, I think it was the setting in of his father being absent.
Yeah.
Had gone out to buy cigarettes and just hadn't gone home.
Yeah, he really took it upon himself to go get the milk. And then some of the casters learnt to kind of control their magic a bit better and not, like, in Krem's case, not kill himself by using it.
They gained 3rd level spell slots, which really did change the course of a lot of fights very quickly.
Yeah.
Blom was a ranger.
Mm-hmm.
He had spell slots, but at that point I was explaining it as they were just things he had on him. So, like, Hunter's Mark was just him focusing really hard. Cure Wounds was just like, oh, he has medicine on him.
Yeah.
And he had a spells like Snare and Alarm, and they were just tripwires.
And Acid Splash, just a vial of acid you throw at people.
It was just like a dead rat filled with bloated acid.
And I think Blom made bank during this time. Yeah.
He made a lot of money, which the party were more than happy to mooch off.
I think Blom kind of bankrolled the party for the rest of the campaign.
Well, up to a certain point. I think there was a certain point when Gronk and Holger decided that they were going to be the only two that really deserved any money. And they were going to hold on to all of the gold and the precious items that we came across.
Yeah.
And they sort of, oh, you're low on money? Well, I'll pay for yours. Because my treat as a favour, but you'll pay me back, won't you? Of course, the rest of the party not knowing that they had unconsciously had all of their potential gains stolen from them.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of leads into the next big arc after the time skip was the Brindle arc. So,
in my opinion, my favourite arc.
Yeah, so I kind of borrowed the main beats from the story from the Red Hammer Doom.
Yep.
Adapted it to 5th edition, and then given it kind of like a facelift to fit the world. Changing some of the theming of the Horde and the monsters to fit with the Dark One, adding some kind of unique encounters. I think that we had an encounter on the bridge that was pretty memorable.
Yep.
I think that was also when we met the no-need goblin. But basically, before we get into that, the party was sent by the Peña here, who I think kind of just canonically got fed up of them mooching off them for 2 years.
Yes, I think they wanted to be rid of the party, especially Holger and Blum.
Yeah.
And I guess Gronk also, because Gronk is an Ogier and they're treated with reverence.
Yeah.
But this is the Ogier that was like the reject.
Yeah, like Gronk's backstory a little bit is he's an Ogier, but his personality is very much not an Ogier.
No.
Ogier are meant to be like wise and calm, and they have patience.
Sage.
Yeah.
And Gronk is...
Gronk is singular.
He is a unique specimen. The intelligence of a particularly smart rock and the brawn of a slightly placid Hulk.
Yeah, and I mean at this point, slightly placid Hulk, because he soon surpassed Hulk during this arc.
Oh, absolutely.
But the party was sent basically by the Penyehere leader, who is this talking owl thing. Practically, I think the last... he's an owling, but he's the last of his kind.
There was a lot of debate amongst the players of, wait, do more owl people exist?
Mm-hmm.
Did this person turn themselves into an owl?
Yeah.
Is this person real?
Yeah.
And how far will we need to walk around this person for them to break their own neck?
Yeah. But he at this point took a certain coin off Krem, the coin being this kind of magical item that he was carrying around that was allowing the evil deity to basically stare into his dreams and corrupt him.
Yeah. He was ridded of his temptation and corruption.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't want that. He made it very clear to us that he preferred having the coin.
Yeah. He very much wanted it.
Yeah.
But once it was made apparent to this kind of powerful being that the coin existed and it was in his possession, he was like, no, give it to me. This is a bad thing. It's going to lead you to your death. He took it away. There were more coins, but they come up later.
Yeah, they reappear. Oh dear.
Yeah. But the party's initially sent to Brindle, or to the area around Brindle, in the continent, or the nation of Novigorsk, to investigate rumours of this roaming horde.
That's right.
I think that's the backdrop to the beginning of it.
And we met the roaming horde almost immediately.
Yeah.
A splinter of it.
Yeah, they kind of rocked up, and that's when you kind of had this fisticuff, this skirmish with some hobgoblins.
Yeah.
Which you all proceeded to bludgeon and batter.
We were morally justified in it. We saw the remains of what they had left behind.
Yeah.
Decimated homesteads and mutilated corpses. So we felt perfectly fine in obliterating them.
Yeah.
And as we moved down into the sort of valley proper, the roots of the mountains, we went... I can't believe it. We didn't go to Brindle first. We went straight to the tower and bridge, didn't we?
Yeah, I think your plan was basically to try and make sure that you could stop them before they got anywhere near civilization.
That's right.
You had a kind of fight at a fort where you fought a lieutenant. You defeated him by, I believe, a kind of guest player putting him in a headlock for 3 minutes.
That's right. We did have a guest player who showed up. He rolled really well.
Mm-hmm.
He was relatively humble.
Yeah.
Then he took all the best loot and then vanished and never returned.
Yeah. Yeah. He basically just ate up anything that existed. He Kirby'd.
He was a ninja.
Yeah.
He came in, he swiped all of our loot and then vanished into the air.
And off to do something, of course, very relevant to the plot.
Yeah. And that was the first time we met a live elf. Because the commander of that sort of group was an elf, an armoured elf.
Yeah.
Tough fight, tough opponent.
Yeah.
And I believe Blum mistakenly healed either him or the next opponent.
No, Blum mistakenly held the next opponent.
Okay, so after we had cleared out that tower,
after you cleared out the tower,
moved out and we found an injured soldier.
Yes.
Blum healed him.
Yeah, he looked like a kind of a Novogorsky armoured guard. A captain was what he introduced himself as. And the carty being the party.
The carty.
The carty. I'm getting imagined.
They can't get anywhere without a cart.
The party proceed to help him out and give him the aid because they're nice guys.
We're charitable individuals as long as it doesn't cost us any money.
Yeah,
and we invited him to come along with us. We were happy to have an extra hand because we wanted the extra damage. An extra person in the party. That's great.
Yeah,
and we made it to the bridge.
And this is when he was like, "This is the bridge that I was protecting and fled away from. My guys got slaughtered, but I can show you a tunnel underneath that can get us in so we can destroy it." Turns out, he was fibbing the entire time.
Yeah.
And he was luring you into a trap.
He was luring us into a trap. And worst of all, because I genuinely believed he was on our side. And this hurt me and my own brain because I was playing Blum as quite a nice guy. And that trap... Well, yeah. I guess it's not anything to say now, but he was in fact a
dragon.
A dragon, an enormous green dragon.
And I guess the beauty of it, I don't know if you knew this, I think I probably told you at some point, the idea to have a player be, a NPC be a dragon in disguise, be shapeshifted, actually came from a one-shot you ran.
You bastard.
Where there was a dragon as a human.
It wasn't the heist. The dragon you fucked as a bard, you bastard.
It was. At that point, I was like,
believable.
I didn't realise dragons could do this. And then I was like, wait a minute. If they can, and we've got a particularly spiteful dragon who's working for this evil guy, why not do this? This is the perfect trap. Especially considering their forward outpost suddenly gone silent.
It was a nasty one too. In that fight, Blum actually died.
Yes.
I mean, most of the players went down at one point or another, but Blum's problem was that he was a character I wanted to be a poisoner. Mm-hmm. So he was like an exterminator, and that was sort of... I based it round, okay, what would... a proper modern day exterminator be in the fantasy realm.
Yeah.
Okay, so he would be this guy that carried around a semi-alchemist, semi-hunter, and he was adept at making poisons.
Yeah.
He did not like to fight his enemies up close after a particularly savage encounter with rodents in the forest when he was younger.
Yeah.
A traumatic experience. He didn't like getting up close. So what he preferred to do was ambush. He'd lay his poisons down, or he'd lace his weapons and attack from afar. I believe at some point I even took the sharpshooter feat in order to get that extra range. And we maybe had one fight in the rest of the campaign where Blum was able to prepare beforehand. He was never able to ambush. And particularly this green dragon, of course, poison breath, poison immunity. Mm-hmm. So Blum was effectively useless.
Yeah, and especially considering the fact that Blum was being the most helpful. He was the first one into the trap.
Yep.
They enter this kind of bridge, gates shut on both sides. Yep. They're stuck in no man's land.
Surrounded by archers and a dragon.
And it was a tough one. Luckily, in the fort beforehand, you found a rod of resurrection, which I think had 2 charges remaining out of 3.
Yep.
The way that kind of the magic items work in the world is typically kind of Revivify isn't a spell that's available just because of the cyclical nature of souls in the world means that they're pretty quick to kind of pass on and move on. And so I wanted kind of the pulling of that soul back to be a bit more difficult. And I wanted the permanence of death to definitely still be there, even at higher levels in D&D. And so you'd got this item, it had 3 uses which you couldn't recharge, and luckily you used one of these 3 that it had available to it to bring back Blum from his death.
It was Krem, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think that really sort of sold me on Krem's friendship. I think Blum, ever since then, got pretty close to Krem. He was probably the closest to Krem by the end of the sort of campaign, by the end of the run.
Yeah.
Which was tragic, given, as we'll discuss, Krem's unfortunate demise.
Yeah. And I think this was also the fact that Lorena had a big moment, because she turned this bridge into a minefield.
She turned it into absolute gravel.
Mm-hmm. She was using exploding earth,
erupting earth, and quake, and all these big, enormously destructive AoE spells.
Yeah.
To knock away the stone, and this became a bit of a theme in that she was a walking breach of the Geneva Convention, and she didn't quite grasp that some of her spells may negatively impact her allies.
Yeah, especially if her allies found to be in the blast radius.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But who's to say? Maybe Lorena secretly hated us.
I mean, her refusal later on to give up jewelry.
It was strangely fitting, given that maybe there was something going on there that we just never saw.
Yeah, maybe there was deep-rooted hatred.
Yeah. Something in there.
But this fight occurs, and this is when kind of something outside the game happens with one of our players. He signs up for a little basic training.
Of course.
Yeah, and so he's booked. He's busy. For a period of time.
Protagonist.
Yeah, our protagonist Thexan is going to be disappearing.
Yeah. So this is the arc in a shonen when we have all the side characters doing their side missions while the main characters are away, and nothing really important happens in the plot.
Yeah.
So of course we destroy the bridge, interrupting the army. The army's going to make it over, but it gives us time.
Yeah, I think it brought you about 4 days,
which is big.
Yeah.
Lots of time to prepare. We sail down the river, evacuating as many villages as we can on the way.
Yep. And then you guys are kind of given the option of travelling by road or trying to go up this river to get to the main city first and just warn.
We concluded that the river was faster.
Yes, especially considering that the boats were now abandoned.
Yeah.
And you guys had kind of just finders keepers your way into a free boat.
Absolutely, of course, we had our guide on the water who had been with us every time we seemed to encounter a body of water in that campaign.
Yeah, Smoky Joe.
Smoky Joe.
Smoky Joe
was he an eldritch horror, a god, shadowy cabal of strangely similarly looking twins?
Yeah.
Who knows?
He was a almost like, from you guys' point of view, like a Tom Bombadil-esque character.
Yeah.
Who was perhaps just more dishevelled and more insane. But he was a good natured guy, and he just wanted to give you a lift on his boat. You then sail up this river, heading towards the larger city of Brindle, and you notice things on the bank, and you encounter a roaming band of dwarves.
I think so the tale of the dwarven sort of escapade was one of the highlights of that arc for me.
Yeah.
Besides, of course, the final battle, which was pretty epic.
Yeah.
So I think we should leave that to its own discussion so that we can talk a little bit more about, because of course we had the additional play. We had Dragrush come in for a certain amount of time there, and there was a lot revealed and huge implications for not only this campaign but also implications for the next campaign and a few one-shots.
Yeah.
That happened in that small escapade, which is probably the most, besides the ending, the most impactful sort of event that happened in that campaign.
Yeah. It was a pretty big thing. I think we'll probably touch on that in its own part. Yeah. But I think in terms of a start, that leaves us at a pretty good point.
Yeah, no, that was the sort of... I suppose Arc 1 might have been before the time skip, but really that was the turning point. That was when things started to be, okay, we are part of a bigger world, and we are the main focus of it.
Yeah, you guys kind of first. It was your kind of coming out moment as a party. You,
That's right. Yeah. The gender reveal of our party.
Exactly.
Was that sort of, Are we going to be good guys? Maybe. We'll think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's been
a good first delve into your rather amazing world and adaptation of The Wheel of Time. Of course, with a few unique twists. We discussed my characters more at length because I'm here to talk about them, but we will have other people on.
Yeah, we want to try and get the rest of the players on to give their kind of perspective.
I mean, who's your favourite to be on?
I really want to talk to Hjalmar, not about Holger as much, but about his later character Valdemar, and about what he's doing in the new campaign.
Oh gosh, what a character Valdemar was! Truly the most memorable moment of that later campaign for me. It was incredible.
Yeah, and I think maybe the character that had the biggest influence on the state of affairs in campaign 2.
Certainly in Restria.
Yes.
Perhaps not worldwide.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, there were a few that have pretty big influence. Blum has a pretty good influence, along with Krem.
Yeah.
I'd say that Blum and Krem sort of go hand in hand. Blum's a little more because he's the sort of person keeping Krem in check in that sort of regard, and he's the main sort of force for that. And then we have Thexan, who we won't talk about yet.
Yeah, because spoilers.
He's got a vaguely... I mean, you did say at the end of the campaign that he's going to be fairly unconnected until much later on in our journey.
I think I'll probably talk about that after we kind of sum up the rest of campaign 1.
Yeah.
That way we can kind of talk about my mindset going into campaign 2 and then the start of campaign 2. And then Felix's third character has a big one.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that when he comes up.
Even Gronk had a big impact. He was a big character. Of course, he didn't have such a scale as Valdemar did on the geopolitics of the world, but we see him brought up again and again in references. Yeah, remembered more by individuals than by large groups.
Yeah, he has this kind of impact on the world as he's passing through it. That there are like these stories about him. Yeah. There was this guy that came through here and he did some really cool things.
And left the next day. He was gone.
I think there's a lot in terms of what each individual player has left.
Certainly, my favourite to bring on would be Felix. Simply, I mean, he's had probably some of the most, in terms of quantity, some of the most characters. Yeah. Certainly, he's had some of the funniest characters. And we definitely need to talk about our theories on what Jasper was doing, what happened, because we were convinced at a certain point that Jasper would be the big bad. He was going to be, rise his ranks, and we'd eventually have to fight Jasper, who would become the Pope of the Pertolovian theocracy.
I think we'll have to have an episode at the end of the summary of Campaign 1 that is just the Jasper episode.
I did. Now, I haven't told you about this. I did have a plan for a Pertolovian theocracy sort of either 1 or 3 shot that surrounded essentially Jasper's ascension to the Pope position.
If you could make the pitch to me that this is a good idea,
I'll consider it.
I'll consider it. But there are quite a few good little kind of conspiracy theory moments for the campaign. I think Jasper is perhaps the biggest one. He was the kind of elephant in the room that no one talked about, but everyone referenced in GIFs and memes.
Yeah, he was the pendulum swimming down. We knew we'd have to encounter him again at some point, but we just did not have any knowledge about where or what form that would take. Yeah. What else are we going to cover? So we've got the rest of Campaign 1. We have the Brindle arc. We have the journey to the west.
Yep. You have the kind of everything that happens when they go west.
Absolutely. Thexen's dire sort of return to his hometown, and all of the consequences of meeting the people there.
Yeah, and then I think from there it's the kind of the journey, not from west but to east, and the kind of mad rush to the other continent.
I think you mean in the west. I've seen your map, and I know that the continent that we went to was west. Don't tell me it was east. I can't deal with this. You showed it to me, and what was was it Ariosk?
Yes.
Ariosk, west of Restria.
Remember, west is west.
Yes.
West is left.
Let's hold up these two hands.
So maybe it was west. But I may change it to make myself feel right.
Alright, okay. Don't you see? The map was the wrong way around.
I can always change the map and gaslight you into
That's true. You have the power. And we have the arc in Ariosk, the death, the unnecessary death, I will add, of a few important characters and their replacements. Although I am personally glad that we got Valdemar out of that, because it was truly extraordinary.
Exactly.
A great experience. And then we had the final battle in the tomb
of a certain hero that we'll kind of talk about next episode.
And besides that, I did my first In Your World one shot.
Yes.
Based on a prison in the Scar. That a few people took part in. We had some characters that we will consider non-canon.
Yeah.
Simply because of their names.
Yeah. One that seemed just to have too much power in those fists.
Yes, we may or may not talk about what we think about the other players and the conspiracy theories that bloomed. But we might save that for another time.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about. And if you are listening, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We're just talking about our D&D game. Yeah. There's probably loads of these. But,
yeah, the only two people listening will be us editing this video.
And then maybe Seb, because he needs more sludge content.
That's true. He will listen to anything we send him.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, Seb, you're a sucker. We got you.
Yeah, this was all a ploy to waste an hour and 10 minutes of your time.
Oh, amazing. I can't believe you fell for it. Hook, line and sinker.
Yeah.
Just for a chance to listen to more about Thexen, and we barely touched him.
Yeah. But, Seb, if you send us money, we might do a Thexen.
That's right. Subscribe to our OnlyFans. Subscribe to our Patreon. You can find us at insert name here.
Yeah. We're still working on the socials,
That's right, yeah. I'm still working out how to unsubscribe from Facebook. But as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, and I think that's it. We'll see you next time.
Do we have a catchy outro phrase? Restria. I barely knew her.
I think with that we'll say goodnight. Take care, everyone.